Semper Fi, everyone. Charlie here with a reading from World War I Marine veteran Thomas Alexander Boyd in his 1923 novel, Through the Wheat. Through the long night that stretched before them, they peered into the darkness, fancying, as they had in the trenches, that each trunk of a tree was an enemy. The least noise was sufficient for overworked nerves to press the trigger of a rifle and send a volley of bullets through the leaves of the trees. The calling of a frightened bird would cause their hearts to throb violently against their ribs. When they spoke, it was in the smallest of whispers, and even so, conversation was peculiarly lacking. Hicks, at times, would think of a letter that his mother had written him in which she had offered to send him a quantity of cyanide of potassium. "You know, son," she had written, "this war is not like the war that Grandpapa used to tell you about. Those frightful Germans have liquid fire and deadly gases, and it is only when I think of how you would suffer if you were burned by their infernal liquid fire that I offer to send it. If you want it, just mark a cross at the bottom of your letter." But Hicks had not marked any cross. He had laughed at the notion at first, and then, as the months slipped by, he had forgotten entirely about it. Now, he wondered if he had done wisely. Suppose he were shot like the fellow in the trench the other day, or gassed as badly as the Frenchman whom he and Pugh had carried back to the first aid station. Yes, it would have been comforting, but he revolted at the thought of poisoning himself. His early religion had been that a suicide does not better his condition. He simply lives in purgatory. It would be hellish to lie gasping forever in purgatory, Hicks thought. Dear old mother, how she had cried when he told her that he had enlisted and was to be sent almost immediately to France. "But, mother, you were such a good patriot before I enlisted, and now you want to not let me go? What kind of patriotism is that?" he remembered having asked her. And how badly she had felt that he only spent an hour with her before he left for training camp. He was amused at the notion of digging holes to lie in. It is insulting, he thought, to ask a person to dig his own grave. It is barbaric. The leaves of the trees were silvered above by the rays of the sun playing upon the dew. Morning had come. Somewhere, and it seemed as if it were only 10 yards away, a bugle blew a short and unfamiliar call. "All right, 3rd Platoon." Lieutenant Bedford's voice was hoarse and with excitement. "Forward, 3rd Platoon." Hesitantly and half whimpering, the platoon climbed out from their holes, over which they had carefully placed boughs of trees to keep the airplanes from seeing the freshly dug dirt. Hicks' helmet felt as if it were about to come off. It wobbled from one side to the other. His face was frozen, and when he wanted to speak out, he felt that he could not because the muscles that controlled his mouth refused to respond. At first, he was intensely aware of his legs, but surging along with the rest of the platoon, he soon forgot about them. 3 Germans were rising up in front of him. "Don't those queer little caps of theirs look funny?" he thought, and from the hip he fired his automatic rifle at them. One fell, and the others lifted their hands in the air and bellowed, "Kamerad! Kamerad!" Hicks passed by them, unheeding. More Germans. The woods were filled with Germans, but the rest of them wore heavy steel helmets that covered their foreheads and ears. "You dirty bastards!" Hicks heard someone scream. By God, he wouldn't have any liquid fire poured on him. "Johnston!" he called, but Johnston, his leader, was not there. Hicks' last clip had been emptied of shells. There were no more in his musette bag. It wasn't possible. Johnston must be someplace near, ready to give him more clips. But no, he threw his rifle away in disgust. A few yards further, he saw the back of an olive-drab uniform, and by one of the hands that was connected to the uniform was clutched a rifle. Hicks snatched the rifle, unbuckled the cartridge belt from the uniform, and hurried blindly on. A deep ravine was in front of him. He half jumped, half stumbled across it, and found himself once more in the wheat field. There was no one in sight. He scrambled back over the ravine and through the woods again, frightened but defiant. Wherever he looked, as he went back through the woods, men were lying. Some of them lie quite still. Others moaned and cried alternately. But Hicks paid no heed. He was still hurrying on. As always, stay salty, stay safe, Semper Fi, and carry on.